But when I have that color, I have that picture because it's real vibrant and beautiful. It's the beauty of our culture and the beauty of people despite having survived historical trauma and attempted genocide up here. So brush dance is just a beautiful picture. It's kind of like a profile thing, but I like it. That's resilience to me. So I used that with permission from Liz Lara. She had given me that photo. Just going to share a little bit of background about me. I kind of jumped a little bit. Born and raised in Bakersfield, California, and yes, I do admit that. My father's family is from Fort Tejon in San Luis Obispo area, Southern California. My father is one of the very first people on the California Indian roll as a Chumash down in Southern California. If folks know tribal history, or it's real convoluted, but a lot of tribes in California were terminated, so their status were terminated. But that is my descendancy through my father. My mother is straight up Irish. My brother just did a whole genealogy thing, and my mom had told us that she's by way of Minnesota, by way of Ireland, and damn it, we looked, and her whole family, all of her, 100%, I'm not joking, it's 100% Irish out of Western Ireland, same region. And my mom was no joke. She's a nurse for 45 years and raised 10 children. My dad was in and out of work a lot, so she was the breadwinner a lot of times. So stuff that she did, pretty amazing. Me and my dad be talking about tribal this and historical trauma. She goes, you know, the first term, or the first use of reservations was actually in Europe. They actually housed the Irish people. I'm like, really? Okay, thank you, Mom. We keep talking. But my daughter's middle name is Quasil. So if folks are familiar with Santa Barbara, Quasil is a village place. There's a Refugio State Beach, which is above Santa Barbara, northern Santa Barbara. That's actually where our tamals and our canoes traditionally were made. So she's named after that area, that village. So Quasil, Pectasan Quasil Feliz. My son's name is Pachomio. And Pachomio he's named after, there was a Chumash leader and California Indians that led some of the revolts against the missions. They were trying to take away our culture. So I specifically named my son that. And he is certainly a all heart and soul kid. He's a beautiful child. He teaches me every day. He's 13 years old. He's also, for some reason, he is this tall. I was 4'1", 4'5", weighed 80 pounds when I was an 8th grader. That boy's already this big, which is cool. I'll be happy when he hits 5'9". It'll be cool. But so the role of culture in life is very profound. He goes with us to ceremonies. My daughter does. My wife does. As a Yurok woman, she's been down there when she was pregnant with my daughter years ago, going to our Petroglyph Dance sites, which are in the mountains between Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo, and Bakersfield, the whole region, which I could show you on the next slide. Here, you look here.
There's a red button.
Oh, cool. Oh, I have a pointer. Cool. Can you see around me okay? This is Bakersfield. This is Santa Barbara, Malibu. This is the Grapevine. Folks are familiar with the Grapevine? You go up the Grapevine? Yeah, it's right here. All this area is all Chumash territory. So you're talking Santa Maria, all these areas. My wife, Yurok lady, who, if anybody knows any local tribal folks, I'm going to do a stereotype here, but I don't mind. I always joke. But they don't like going past Ukiah. So we get her down to Southern California. She goes down maybe every 3 years. But I remember vividly, though, speaking of culture and my ties to that, she was pregnant with my daughter at the time, and she got to see condors fly over us.
Nice. Wow.
Pretty awesome. And that was with my dad, who, by the way, my dad's still a practicing Catholic, and that's something he'll go with us. He'll bring his rosaries to us as we're dancing and singing, which is fine, because I think whatever we use to kind of help us to be strong in our spiritual faith, that's completely all right. But he's taught me a lot with and when I grew up Catholic, I wasn't one of those just go to Easter Mass on Catholic. I mean, we did the Holy Feast of the Michelin Man. We do Tuesday, Mondays. We never missed. Fasting like crazy. We did all that. But that taught me the role of dedication and prayer. And I do that now by fasting and praying. And I appreciate having that background. And you'll find a lot of the tribes in Southern California, and even in the Southwest, they do a lot of mixing. Pueblo folks, Southwest New Mexico, of Catholicism is pretty strong there. But so I honor that too. But yeah, there's that story. Let me back up. So, are folks following me okay? Hopefully I'm not ranting too much. So my professional background, after graduating with my degree, I have a degree in psychology from Humboldt State University. I worked for United Indian Health Services for about 6.5, 7 years, and I was a substance abuse counselor. So right out of HSU at the age of 23, I worked as a rehab at a residential treatment facility. It used to be called the United Indian Lodge in Eureka on 9th and L Streets. I believe HR Humboldt Recovery Center is now occupying that building. But that was my stomping grounds right when I got it. So I was a 90-day treatment counselor and drug testing parolees and probationers and running groups. So really trial by fire, but I enjoyed it. Very tough work, but it taught me a lot. Then I went from there, working with more juvenile probation youth in our court systems here. A lot of our tribal youth were being sent to California Youth Authority prison at an alarming rate, a lot more than the other youth in the area. Now, as folks may or may not know, the California Youth Authority has been completely revamped. The prison system, our youth prison, is now different. The different camps they've had throughout the state, but it's different now. But back then it was pretty bad. So my role was to go in there and let's send them into rehab. We had some residential treatment facilities specifically for tribal youth, so I became that person too. We had San Diego facility, Oregon, so that was a big part of my role. Went to HSU. I was hired as a therapist at HSU for a while. 2006, I started as a therapist at the Counseling and Psychological Services, where for some reason I was asked to be, I was a tenure track position as a faculty member. I had no idea what the heck that meant. I was like, okay. So here I'm kind of fumbling around. Remember, I'm the kid from Bakersfield, all this and all that. I didn't even know what even the acronyms meant after it. AY, academic year, AR, academic related. I had no idea what the job position meant. All I knew was they gave me summers off and I had winter breaks off. Like, wow, this is kind of neat. And I felt like I was stealing money from the state. But faculty people, I was like, it's a very privileged, awesome way to be. But so yeah, I was tenured, working towards my LCSW, getting my hours there. That didn't work out. I had some difficulty passing the exam, from which now I have to get my hours back. But as folks know, after you get your master's, you can become a licensed therapist. So that's still something on my mind to do. It takes about 3,000 hours you have to accumulate before you take the exam, and then you get your licensure. But I was on that track. From there, I went to work at the Dean of Students Office as a social services, kind of a social worker for the whole campus crisis unit care services. I think I was the first one. We helped develop that program. Now HSU has something called care services through the Dean of Students Office. I was the first care coordinator. And then the social work department where I'm at now, maybe an offer I couldn't refuse. They asked me to be a full-time faculty member. So I teach a lot of classes regarding tribal, multicultural perspective, advanced practice for undergrad and graduate students. And I supervise students too who are doing the field work. So a lot of talk about me there, but I'm going to jump into my content. Are there any questions or comments at this point? Okay. I just want to give you a frame because it's the same thing I share with my students, and I think a lot of you with your wisdom, I know there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in this room, particularly with some of our communities, and this being the Multicultural Center. But I'm imagining with some of you with your families and your backgrounds and where you come from, people want to know who you are. And so what is your frame? What are you about? Who's your hometown? That's particularly important that I've found with communities because I don't want to just go in and start prodding and probing and asking questions of people I'm working with to try to help without them knowing who the heck I am. I really believe that. So trust and rapport building. So you certainly get a sense of who I am, for bad or for worse. For good. If you look at here, all the way up and down, so we're talking Los Angeles. And for each of these areas, I know people who are from these tribes, who are alive and still working on regalia and singing despite historical trauma and surviving attempted genocide and colonization. They're still doing the work. My dad always shares with me the Yokuts. This is an anthropological term. Yokuts had several names like Wachumni, Yalamne. Yalamne is actually the Yokut traditional indigenous peoples of Bakersfield. The Yalamne tribe is what's there in Bakersfield. And there's some Yalamne descendants that are still there trying to practice and sing their songs and ceremonies. So Yokuts is a very broad term. But Yokuts essentially, if we use that term, all the way from Stockton to the foot of the Grapevine, to the whole Central Valley as we know it, a lot of tribes were in there. And a lot of history in California, which is it's real kind of some real shocking things that took place. A lot of things happened in California, but as we stand. And if you look up here, which I'm going to go to my next map, I just want to give you, this should be like our Welcome to Humboldt or Welcome to Northern California page. So take a look at this. This is where we're at, folks, up here in Humboldt County and the North Coast. How many people have driven past Santa Rosa and going into Humboldt County? Yeah. So I don't know if you agree with me or not, but they need to put more highway lights up for one thing. It's dark. But, the reason why I do that little joke there is because there's a ton of tribes that you're driving through. When you go through Mendocino County from Ukiah all the way up here, there's a ton of tribal rancherias and reservations. A lot of tribal groups. Pomos, Miwoks, Wailaki, Yukis. And then you get into Humboldt County. What was that?
I'm Yuki.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Where are you from?
Kovo.
Oh, there. Bam, there it is. Exactly what I'm talking. I shouldn't talk too bad about the highway lights, sorry. So I'm offended. I work for Caltrans too. No, I'm joking. but a lot of tribal folks, a lot of rich cultural history despite the garbage that took place that people survived. There's roundhouses where they have ceremonies that are still up and still running. Roundhouses that have been there for 600, 700 years that are still there in the same place. Some of them may have been destroyed, but they get built back up again by families. Some other village areas, even though it might be a double wide trailer, is where a village and a community stood 1,000 years ago. I'm not making this up. So this is the rich history that we have up here. And I bring all this up because this gives my foundation and my reason for doing the research I do and the work that I do, especially with my thesis. Just the pictures here. This right here is a picture of one of our canoes, our boats here. We have dugout canoes up here. We use redwood planks, the Chumash folks that go out to the islands from Santa Barbara. We have something called the Channel Islands, redwood plank canoes. There's Thule boats here. And here's language. There's people at the language conference bringing back language throughout California. And this dance group from San Diego. So I just kind of had these images that I put up here to have us think. So, to my research and what I did in my master's program, as some of you may be doing, if you look up anything with tribal health, in my opinion, that I've seen, I don't mean to make a broad stroke, but I think I'm pretty safe saying this. If you look up tribal health, all you're going to see is DUI rates, suicide completion rates, mortality rates, death rates, all negative. So I said, you know what, I'm tired of looking at that research about tribal people and my people, and as a general, like what's positive out there? What is working? What's keeping us going? What's positive? So I looked at the condor. For us, is a very sacred animal. Up and down the state, all the way to the tip of South America, all the way to Alaska, the condor is also referred to as the thunderbird. Around here, the Kaduk tribe, past Orleans, northeastern Humboldt corner, the condor was used by their doctors. When we say doctors, they're medicine people. They used to doctor people up because the condor feather, very powerful. So down south, as I mentioned the story with my wife seeing the condor as a Yurok woman, I use that as a metaphor, the condor, as American Indian people being condors. In the 1980s, lead-based bullets and hunting and loss of environment, the condor was down to 30 total California condors at one time, as there was thousands at one point in California. So let me repeat that. In the 1980s, they were down to, I think, even less than 30 condors were still alive. So we almost had a lost, endangered, extinct species. Now they're doing really well because of San Diego Zoo and other places.
And they're bringing them back.
Yeah, they're bringing them back. They're doing real well now. Right now, they even have them hatching in the wild now.
Nice.
But that's a lot what we could do with all of our communities. So the name of my research is Successful American Indian Adults and the Protective Factors that Got Them There. I always laugh because my thesis committee let me use the word got them there. I always love it. It kind of cracks me up. But they said, you're good. They like the time. Here, just as the condor had almost become extinct, so too have various communities of American Indian communities, adults living in the United States today. As the condor is making a comeback and staying alive despite years of demise, so too are American Indian adults attempting to live in the world today as successful people. So here's my lit review. This is the research I found, which is Buckley was up here in 1997 as a researcher, and he has this great quote that talks about people up here in Humboldt County. I'm just going to read part of it. Suddenly, in the first few months of that year, news of a gold strike on the Trinity River brought an estimated 10,000 fortune seekers into the Klamath River drainage. That was the beginning of what Indian people came to call variously the end of the world, the time when the stars fell, and the end of Indian time, a very powerful moment. This is something that I have some of these quotes, but if you Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart she's Lakota. She talks about post-colonial historical trauma, intergenerational historical trauma from 1984. Like children of Jewish Holocaust survivors, subsequent generations of American Indians also have a pervasive sense of pain from what happened to their ancestors. What that's saying is, as tribal people, from what we all survived and our ancestors, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, is still affecting us today as tribal people, even being descendants. This is part of my research in 2003, that American Indians are more likely to be placed in vocational, non-college track courses in high school as compared more likely as compared to other ethnic groups. American Indians are also less likely to progress further in schooling, either dropping out, not pursuing higher education in universities or colleges. In terms of success, we have a dropout rate of 50% and sometimes 85% higher than the average American Indian adults. The reality of attending college, let alone graduating, is made difficult. Findings have shown that American Indian people are less likely to attend college than any other ethnic group. In terms of incarceration rates, if you were to go to juvenile hall in Eureka right now, there's maybe a population maybe 42. When they kind of stack beds, it gets real crowded in there. I would be willing to bet today, if you were to go in, you would probably have at least 22 American Indian youth in there, out of the 40, almost half, probably 45 to 50 on any given day. The jails, if you were to go to Humboldt County Jail, you'd probably see, per terms of ethnic groups, the largest minority in there would be American Indians, males and females, in our jails here. This is also from the national study. Per capita, American Indians are incarcerated at a rate of 38% above the national average. Alcohol abuse, leading cause of American Indian death and accidents, liver disease, homicide, and suicide. Alcohol-related problems with American Indian adults are 3 times the rate for patients in the general non-Indian population. And of course, we know with family abuse, neglect, child abuse, those things can, where children are affected by that. A lot of negative ways. So I was tired of looking at all that research. I'm like, this is making me feel like crap. I'm sure you're hearing me read this and you're seeing this. It's kind of maybe a visceral reaction in our belly and our minds like, no, that sucks. I've heard about it, but wow, that's there. So I did the same thing. I'm saying, what about success? What does it even look like for American Indian people? So I said, you know what? I want to look at success. What works? And I'm going to pause here for a second and share something with all of you, and I'm going to invite you to, I give you full permission to do this. The factors, and I'm talking about protective factors, and that's a term I'm about to use. I believe all of these factors can be multicultural. This is not just for American Indian people or Native American people. It's also, I think, for African American communities, Latino communities, Asian communities, even LGBTQ communities. The roles of identity, sense of childhood upbringing, peers and mentors, traditional culture and ritual. I think it's very cross-cultural here. So if in your mind and your critical thinking, which I know all of you are just really smart folks, I know that in this room, feel free to put those pieces together in your mind as you're watching this, okay? This is not exclusively for Native people. But the idea is if it helps inspire you or kind of look at that, feel free to, it's okay. So this is a Shumash basket up there. We use a coil design, a little bit different than up here. That's one of ours. But for Native Americans who still practice the traditional ways, medicine, religion, family, community, and nature are woven together as tightly as a reed basket. Harmony with the world outside you and the mind inside you is the short path to contentment. I like that quote because it kind of gives the whole basis of my research. As I said, little existing literature focuses on successful employed American Indian adults. What was found was a great deal of literature dealing with school success and successful treatment modalities for the mostly general, mostly non-Indian population. So that's what I did find for successful modalities for successful stories of American Indian adults. Unfortunately, that's what I found. Still a good thing, but the unfortunate piece was because it was hard to find it for American Indian communities. Condors Amidst Extinction is a unique strength-based study asking a direct question. And strength-based, if you may have heard that from maybe your psych courses or your social work classes maybe so far, strength-based is essentially asking clients and people you work with what's working, what has worked, and how do we get back to it. So you're not coming at your clients and people you work with a deficit model, like how did that happen or what was screwed up. Strength-based means we're asking people what has worked before, what is working now. Let's work on that. So I looked at it as a strength-based study. Do the protective factors of family, peers and mentors, sense of identity, and traditional culture contribute to the success of American Indian adults? Some of us might say right off the bat, heck yeah, that sounds good. But we have to prove it in research. We have to have the study and the numbers behind it. So here's what I did. The purpose of the study was to explore successful American Indian adults. My age group was 18 to 35. I looked at protective factors, once again, those protective factors, family, peers, mentors, sense of identity, and traditional culture. And I had my bar for success was an interesting definition of success. It was not being on criminal probation, currently attending school, or being employed. My boss at the time was Roy Redner, Shoshone. He's taught at CR a number of times. He looked and said, damn, wow, that's a pretty low bar. I said, well, yeah, it is. But I want to look at that. For American Indian people, that's a bar we're going to have at this point. So my success definition is there, just so you know. I developed a 20-item qualitative measure, and I have 14 self-identified American Indian adults. It's a small sample size. I'd like to replicate this sometime in the future. But 14 folks were interviewed via phone or in person. Here's my interview guide. This is real detailed here, but just in case you're wondering, out of curiosity, I'm going to go through this briefly. But just some of the demographic information. Did you graduate from high school, currently on probation? Are you American Indian? What tribes? Currently employed? And you might want to notice my one factor, my little section here on family is interesting. I have these probing questions, which kind of led to discussion, but who were your primary caregivers? Because I didn't want to make an assumption that people had mom and dad. We had grandparents, aunties, sisters, siblings raising them. Were those individuals taking care of you reliable and able to meet your needs adequately? I asked that question. You can probably tell that question is pretty unique. Describe your experience growing up in your family or what you consider your family before the age of 18. I got interesting answers, which I'm going to share with you. Has that experience contributed to your current life situation or success? So no matter how they answered number 8, they responded to number 9. If it was a negative experience or a positive. And prior to age 18, have any negative experiences caused you to be as successful as you are now? What an interesting question if you think about it. I actually asked, did some, in layman's terms and probably vernacular here, but did crap happen in your life that helped contribute to your success? Mentors and peer group, I talked about that. Who'd you look up to? Role models. And I asked them a sense of identity question. Are you proud to be American Indian? I didn't want them to go, hell yeah, heck yeah. I wanted to ask why. Tell me why you're proud to be American Indian. What does it mean to you to be American Indian? And my last, which is, for me, the most important one for me in this study, is traditional culture. I asked the response, are they familiar with their traditional culture and ceremonies and practices? And have those practices contribute to their success? And here's the real one, my last question, number 20. How do you think your life would be different if you didn't have access to your traditional culture and ceremonies? And I got some really interesting answers, which I'm going to share with you here momentarily. Question or comments at this point?
Who wouldn't want to go to ceremonies like powwows and shows? I love going to those. I love going to Indian days. I love going to powwows and Christmas Day. I love going to the powwows and dances.
I think in our communities, some folks are, well, a lot of our folks are real, that's something they're drawn to. You'll see in this study, I actually have one respondent who was always the outlier. Like, no, had nothing to do with that. No, my culture didn't help. So it's the diversity of my sample. You'll see that. When all you start doing research, you're going to have one or two outliers. Like, okay, but I included them. But that's a good point you're bringing up, a reality. Thank you for that and sharing that. I want to stop and pause for something about my own empowerment and the role of, here I am as a graduate student. I gave you my background from Bakersfield High School to getting my psych degree. I had the power to develop this survey. And Long Beach said, you're good to go, thumbs up. This is now published in Long Beach Library. So what I'm saying is, it blows me away to think about that. And all of you are in the same position I am where you could do that. So do not cut yourself short ever. So now I think about this. This is something they have. Whenever someone looks up keywords in the Long Beach Library of tribal success, Native American, protective factors, this pops up. And that blows me away. 8 of them were female, 6, all 14 respondents, all identify as American Indian. I had 57% were female, then 43 were male, 13 were employed, one of them was unemployed. So here's where I asked about success in terms of schooling. All of them had their high school diploma or an equivalent. 3 of them were in school, 11 of them were not in school but were working, and another 2 of them were in school and going to and working. And I had 4 of them had no higher education beyond high school. 1 of them had an AA degree, 5 had a bachelor's degree, and 4 of them had a graduate degree. So those are the respondents I interviewed. The American Indian family is seen as a buffer and coping mechanism, incorporating the use of aunties, uncles, and grandparents. Family can offer more potential for success despite trauma-related stressors affecting American Indians. This is probably pretty universal. Family, for a lot of us in this room, multiculturally, it's pretty universal. Whatever we call family, by the way. I'm not talking nuclear family, mom and dad and a dog and a white picket fence. No, I'm talking auntie, uncle, grandpa, whoever raised you, who you consider your family. I believe this. Despite how crazy my family was and unhealthy. Once again, a lot of detail here, but my response, 11 of them had a mother and father, 2 of them had a mother primary, mother, father, and 1 student said my mom and dad, but also everybody in my community, my cousins, aunties, they all helped raise me. So I had 1 respondent that said my whole family. When I say family, I mean cousins, aunties, everybody raised me. Here's where it gets interesting. Do you think your childhood upbringing was it adequate and reliable? Close to 80% of them said yes, but but 3 of them said yes along with difficulties. And these tribal folks I spoke to, along with difficulties portion here, they blew me away because I thought I had it bad. But they're like, no, my dad would be arrested or locked up for months at a time, and then my mom would be sick, my parents would be absent, they'd be fighting, come home from school, my dad was drunk on the floor. So they really kind of downplayed how chaotic it was. Like, yeah, it was kind of difficult, but once I probed more, I'm like, holy moly, I didn't give them that reaction, but like, wow. Interesting even more is when I asked, do you think your childhood, in general, your childhood experience was positive or negative? Right down the middle, 7 positive, 7 negative. Did your current childhood contribute to your current success? Despite being right down the middle, 93% of them said yes, it did, regardless. So some of those 7 who said negative said, even with that, it contributed to my current success. Did your negative family experiences contribute to your current success? I even got a little more specific. Once again, 93% of them said yes. 13 of the respondents said yes. 13 respondents of my study said yes, it did, even if it was negative. And as I said, feel free to jump in with questions or comments. Here's some of the actual quotes from my qualitative study because it's an interview format, so I'm going to share some of them with you. It was definitely good. We had a lot to do with extended family, various cousins living with us, barbecues, brush dances, summer camp. Everything we did was in a community setting. I'm going to drop down here. Turmoil, constant unsettled feeling. I would go to school, not want to come home, find out that my father was drunk at home raising hell. This comes from a friend of mine who's Tohono O'odham and Chicano. He became a lawyer, passed the bar in New Mexico, and was a chosen right advocate as a lawyer. That's his quote. Peers and mentors as protective factors. Studies have pointed to the fact that most American Indian students who have aspirations to pursue higher education are influenced by one or more persons. It has been shown that non-academic factors, such as peer and mentor influence, play a greater role in educational achievement than do academic factors. I'm going to validate this because when I got to those honors classes, I didn't know what the hell a study group was. I was like, man, I thought students knew how to hustle. They knew how to get study notes and work with each other. Like, wow, is this even allowed? This feels like we're cheating. No, it's what we're supposed to do. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Helping each other out. This is called coexisting and studying together. So if students don't have that peer mentor influence and the ideas of kind of like some of you maybe when you're first doing your college application, some of you may or may not have had the chance to have someone teach you how to do the application or what it was like to do. By the grace of God and the higher power for me, I checkmarked EOP. If I didn't checkmark EOP, I would be in the Marines. And at that time, the Gulf War was still going on. The racist Jim Crow laws of the South, but also Jim Crow exists in California, by the way. Oakland, LA, the East Coast, New York, the enlightened North. A lot of racism occurred there too. It still does to this day, but also with Asian, Japanese internment camps, Chinese exclusion acts,
children locked at the borders of the United States right now.
Indeed, indeed. So the idea of resilience is being really tried and tested here. But we are all products of families that come from these kind of histories, which is powerful and beautiful at the same time. And difficult too. Here's kind of breaking this down a little bit. Who'd you look up to? 12. And here, to this young lady over here, here's that one outlier. Who'd you look up to as a child? They're all, no one. Okay, cool. I only joke about it because it was kind of peculiar. But family members, 86% of them. Who do you look up to now as an adult? Family members, and 3 of them said non-family members. Their current or past mentors, because I kind of broke it down with mentors and peers, family members. And 3 of them said community people and family members. And then there's that one person again, no mentors at all. And all 100% of my respondents said that friends and peers play a significant role in their current success. So they said they could not do it without community and friends. That says a lot to me about connecting, finding friends. And by the way, one of my respondents, his name is Leo. His real close friend was a Hmong friend out of Crescent City. And they're both just these goofy guys who went through Upward Bound program. And I know they survived HSU as university students getting their undergrad because of each other. So that was his friend he met. So peers and mentors. You never know where it's going to come from. I think some of you are experiencing that now. If you think about your best friend as someone you connect with, I know for some of my best friends, I'll totally forget how I even met him in the first place. We just kind of met by happenstance, sitting at a cafeteria table one time, or just started clicking. The quotes I got. My high school wrestling coach, because he was successful in life without having parents in his life. He was always encouraging me to reach for my goals and go to college. And that college was a possibility. I looked up to that. So one person. Some of you may have in this room right now, you have just that one person who inspired you. I talked about George Estrada, Dr. Estrada. That person even think about graduate school. All it took was for him. Certain periods in my life in college, a student program helped. One teacher in high school said I should go to college. And this person said they were the only ones. My uncle, for different reasons, his perspective on life, choices, knowledge of our culture, traditions, language, basketry, and for being successful in both worlds. The Indian world and the non-Indian world. Here's another factor, sense of cultural identity. Sense of identity has even been shown to bring about a better sense of psychological wellness for American Indian people. Issues such as self-esteem, depression, and anxiety are affected positively. So sense of identity, a sense of security of who you are, where you come from. I just want to go through, I know it's a lot of numbers here, but pride in being, that's that question when I asked them, are you proud to be American Indian? A lot of them were like, heck yeah. But I said, why? Explain why. A lot of them said, due to my traditions and culture, my uniqueness and my identity, due to my ancestors' history and my history. And I had my lawyer friend, he went off on some crazy tangent, so I gave him his own category, which was, he did not answer the question clearly, so that's what I put on there. But I also asked him a question about self-perception, that you can accomplish anything you put your mind to. And keep in mind from what our colleagues said here, these are folks with the AA high school degrees and master's level degrees and undergrad degrees, so all of them have done a lot of things already in their life to kind of have that confidence, but 9 of them had some really confident yes answers to that question, and 5 had less confidence. But this is their self-perception of what being American Indian is. They said traditional family knowledge, minority status, difficult life, practicing traditional ceremonies, and being an active community person. I am willing, as I've said this before, more than likely, if I were to put all my respondents in a room, they'd probably all include all of these. But these are the ones I kind of highlighted and I heard most prominently from each individual respondent. Does that make sense to everybody? Here's some actual quotes. I definitely feel like a minority all the time, or a minority, all the jobs, hardly any other natives. This quote comes from a Siksika Indian out of right above Montana, who now works at the Hanford Astronomy Lab, LIGO Observatory, where they just found the black hole and the whole team got nominated and awarded the Nobel Prize for it. He's part of a supervising team as a lead physicist. This is his quote. This is before he got big, so I got him before he's famous, so hopefully he'll pay me some money. I'm just joking. But this is his quote. He knows, especially in the sciences and the STEM, not many other native males and native folks. It means I have responsibility. Here's the other quote. I was taught by both sides of my family. I have a direct responsibility to share, to be humble with that. Continually learning how to conduct myself. They said being American Indian is practicing my customs, knowing who I am, my self-identity, my own tribal affiliations. Get to know who you are. That's what they said being American Indian is, and why they have pride. My last factor here, protective factors. So far we've gone over these protective factors and contribute to successful American Indian adults, is this, traditional culture. Traditional health practices are another source of support and wellness for Native Americans. These practices include use of roots, teas, healing ceremonies, and consultations with traditional healers. Spirituality and rituals also provide support and sustenance. And also, with one of our colleagues here bringing up familiarity with traditions and ceremonies, 64% of my respondents said yes, they do have familiarity with their traditions and culture. 5 of them said not so much, not very much. They didn't have that much familiarity. Did traditions and ceremonies contribute to the current success? 86%, 12 of them said yes, it did. And 2 of my respondents said no, it didn't. So there's the diversity of our sample. There's always outliers. Life without traditions or ceremonies? I found this one very interesting. This is my very last item on my research. And 64% of the 9 of the respondents said my life would be completely different and negative. It wouldn't be good, essentially, is what they were telling me. It'd be different, but they would seek out other beliefs. This was an interesting one because I'd asked my tribal respondents, what would your life be like without ceremony? They look at me like, I can't really, I don't know, what? I don't, and they pretty much are telling me, I can't picture my life without spirituality. And some of them actually said, I'd probably be Buddhist. It'd be something. I would do something. I would have to have spirituality in my life. So even that question to some of my respondents who are pretty traditional, they could not fathom not having culture in their life. And then one person said no effect on their life. There's that outlier again. Here's some of the quotes, which I think are very powerful. My life would be completely different if I was unable to do my traditions. knowing where I come from, my land base. I'd probably be drinking, fighting, going to jail, or dead. I'd be getting into trouble. This is the first slides we looked at, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those horrible numbers, negative stuff. So this gentleman, without even seeing my lit review, mapped this out for me. And this person has a science degree from Humboldt State, as a natural resource major from Humboldt, now working for the Hoopa tribe as a father of 4. And at the time, oh, by the way, he transferred from CR, by the way. He's a CR Eureka graduate. This was his quote. But now he's a forestry official up in Hoopa in the valley. This one is very powerful to me, in my opinion. It would be hollow. Ceremonies are woven together in all aspects of my life. I can't even imagine what it would be like. My life would be empty. So the roles of traditions and cultures, and just sense of, that culture and traditional culture is very important. So, just kind of, I'm gonna open up for questions and comments here very, very shortly here. But here's what I found out. The family theme was pretty big. There's other research that showed that family is a strong parental involvement, but also care provider involvement. I don't want to just say parental, but in schooling led to higher achievement among American Indian students. Some of you in this room are products of your auntie, our big sister, our family cracking the whip on you saying, damn it, go to school. My wife and I were pretty strict on my kids, more than I ever was, but my parents were too. I remember vividly, I talked about I had an alcoholic home, but dinner table conversations at my house. Remember, I'm the youngest of 10, so by the time it got to me, the house got smaller and smaller. There's 2 of us. But I remember my dad announcing in front of my friend having dinner at our house one night. He said, oh yeah, by the way, you're not doing sports unless you have B's. Thanks, Dad. That's awesome. I didn't say it like that. I was pissed, yelling, left the table, threw something. My friend was left at the table. Thanks, Vincent. This is great. This is fun. Despite trauma-related histories, friends and mentors, American Indian youth relied on Indian and non-Indian peers to talk with and helping them to cope with day-to-day stressors. Some of you are developing relationships right now here at CR, people you study with, people you go BS with, people you get a ride with, talk with. That's important to have that reinforcement of who you are, but also just to consult with. I call Aaliyah, she calls me. See Reed here, I'm going to pick on Reed. These are people that I call and have coffee with because I need to. As a faculty member at HSU, I have my moments where holy crap, did that just happen today? I still rely on people to talk to keep my sanity, because I'm a human being. I'm not in this alone. One person, once again, caring positive adults in the lives of children is a strong prevention tool against delinquency. I believe that. By the grace of God and prayer and everything for me, and my higher power and my spirituality, and probably my coaches, I didn't end up in juvenile hall, but I was very close to it. Connections with family and community, as well as traditional ways, will lead to a sense of happiness and harmony with the outside world as an American Indian person. But we could put a little blank there as a Chicano person, as an African American person. However you want. As a person from a rural community. I think all of that, we could fill in the blank there. So, just some more highlights here, kind of repeats here. But this is my, essentially, surrounding this condor is the idea of being successful of these factors. And I hope folks are kind of getting a little bit of a sense of what I'm talking about. This is cross-cultural. I think not just with tribal communities, but we all have a sense of traditional culture, our rituals that we can maybe go back and find and research. Family has history, maybe some things they did. But your sense of who you are, your cultural identity, the role of peers and mentors, and of course family, for better or for worse, for bad or for good, family, whatever the heck that looks like. Because in this research, as I showed you, despite family upbringing being chaotic or even negative or even very traumatic, 93% of my respondents with their graduate degrees and undergraduate degrees and AAs said that it still contributed to their success. That tells me something. Essentially also telling me they wouldn't change that history and made it who they are today. And that hurts for me to say that because I blanked out a lot of what I've gone through as a young child. But it did make me who I am today, that I'm kind of working with all of you and I have empathy to work with other people who've survived trauma. I would say I'm a victim survivor. But yeah, they've given me that path. So I probably would tend to agree with it, but it makes me feel funky to even say that. Like I wouldn't change that. I know for sure Downward would want to have my kids go through it. And thankfully I don't think they have. So in the late 70s, they started bringing back these dances. And a lot of it was done in secret. These dances and traditional culture and languages and songs, regalia making. families held the regalia that was over sometimes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old without showing it out in public, and then finally getting it to be back danced. Once again, resiliency. We have something called the Native American Graves Protection Act, NAGPRA, but also Repatriation Act of Native Americans. We're taking stuff back from the museums that was taken from us, and now those things are now dancing in our dances now. Smithsonian, museums in France, Russia, coming back to California Indians, and now they're dancing where they needed to be in the first place. So it's like finding a missing child and bringing them back. This is happening now. That's power and resiliency. That's people such as you starting out in school, getting their degrees in museum studies, becoming policy changers and advocates, and going to Washington and say, that needs to come home. Really? Do you know how to handle it? Yes, I do, because I have the research and the study behind me. I know how to handle museum stuff. Plus, I have my community behind me. That's power. My grandfather was hit by a car walking home drunk from Wasco to Bakersfield when my dad was 9 years old in 1941. My grandmother, 4'0", dark-skinned native lady, raised 4 children in Bakersfield in 1941. And she was hard and mean because she had to. But that's what my dad grew up with. Brothers going to the war, coming back. They went to World War II, of course, but Great Depression survivors. But I think of that, and I'm very damn privileged to be where I'm at now, sitting here talking about who we are, what we're about. But as you're reminding me of that as you're talking, is that we are, a lot of us are survivors. And a lot of us have that same similar history in all of our families cross-culturally. We have our ancestors and even great-grandparents, grandparents, and even parents who sacrificed to get us to where that is, which leads to these things. We have these, despite it's a struggle sometimes to find them, but they're there. And sometimes because of their sacrifice, we're going to have to develop these now. Some of these we have to develop from scratch. We're going to have to start developing our sense of identity. I talk to my dad now, and God, he brings up the craziest things. But he's like, oh yeah, Mom had all kinds of herbal remedies in our pantry. I'm like, what the hell, man? Why didn't you tell me that before? Oh yeah, she'd use mugwort and sage and... Dad, you never talked about... Oh, I must have told you. He said, Dad, I was born in 75, man. You don't tell me much. But the history's there. Like, how do we talk to our elders and learn that history? And so it's sometimes we have to fight for it to get that knowledge and history, but it's there. And even if it's not, it's okay, because we are already in active activism and survivors because we're sitting here right now, breathing. Thank you for sharing.